It is my pleasure to introduce Mrs. Tabitha Rempe Owen, a 2003 graduate of Smith Center High School. Tabitha graduated from Washburn University in 2007 and Washburn University School of Law in 2010. She has worked at Kansas Association of School Boards, the Kansas Attorney General's Office, and had a private practice in Topeka. Tabitha and her husband own Dave's Heating and Air, and they have two beautiful children, Lenny and Louie. Tabitha is currently serving her second term as the Smith County Attorney.
We also have Tabitha's brother, Mr. Travis Rempe, a graduate of the class of 2009. Travis attended Sterling College and played football before joining the Marine Corps, where he served as a non-commissioned officer. He left the Marine Corps in 2013. He lives in Smith Center and works for Shones Fumigation. And it must be said, these two alumni belong to our one and only Mrs. Rempe. Let's give Tabitha and Travis a big grab and welcome.
Thank you so much for having us. We're really honored to be a part of your homecoming celebration. It would be naive to pretend that being a Smith Center alumni means the same thing to everyone. Each and every one of us has had and will have vastly different experiences, both as students of Smith Center and after graduation. My brother and I are just two examples of these different experiences. I was a student who dabbled in athletics.
And I was an athlete who dabbled in academics.
In the classroom, you students didn't get to experience the magic of Mr. E teaching chemistry or the pleasure of Becky teaching senior English. However, we're all still dissecting frogs with Mr. Buckmaster. Mrs. Molzon is still teaching us Spanish that, despite our best efforts, we will likely never remember. And I was surprised to learn that my favorite accounting teacher, Fred, has been replaced by Mr. Lynn. Seriously, I don't know who started calling Mr. Lynn Fred or why, but I was shocked when I learned that his students and players don't call him Fred anymore. Some things haven't changed much. You're still having Spirit Week and giving Spirit Awards. In my day, it was just one award at the end of the week. Whoever did the best the whole week got Mr. and Mrs. Spirit. And believe it or not, you're looking at Miss Spirit 2003. Thank you.
Although you guys are missing out on some pretty great homecoming traditions as well. I know you think you had a bonfire last night, but in my day we had a huge bonfire where we'd roast our opponent's mascot. And then we'd lead the infamous snake all over town. This tradition was passed along from class to class and was no doubt the highlight of homecoming week. In retrospect, I suppose I can see why it was discontinued. I don't think there was a single year without a fender bender, and as it went from throwing water balloons and silly string, it quickly escalated to eggs and worse. Let's just say it got gross.
As county attorney, I'd just like to say that I'm not super bummed about the elimination of the snake.
Just like in the classroom, Smith Center has seen some changes on the court and on the field. Mr. Lynn is still leading the Lady Red on the volleyball and basketball courts. The Redmen have seen their fair share of basketball coaches since I graduated, but that's probably about all I could tell you about our basketball program. You guys didn't have the opportunity to be coached by tonight's Hall of Fame inductee, Roger Barta, or Big Hutch. And you won't have the experience of winning every football game you play, but you're still winning state championships, and you aren't missing out on what's most important. Coach Sass was coaching when I was in junior high, and our program's first priority has always been making good young men first, and winning comes later on.
I'm sure Mr. Rogers is still telling all of you about how back in his day, he ran every 400 meters so hard that he threw up every time. Well, I'd bet that if he ran a 400 today, he'd definitely throw up. But seriously, Thomas Wolfe was wrong when he said you can't go home again. Travis and I are just two of many examples that you can. The truth is, when Mr. Wolfe wrote those words all those years ago, what he meant was home wouldn't be as you remembered it. You can't go back to how things were. That time changes everything, and in that regard, he was correct. But in fact, you can come home again, and maybe you should. One day, you might be surprised to find that you want to.
I left Smith Center High School ready to experience new things, but also wanted to do some of the same, like play football. I spent a year playing college football at Sterling College, and while I'd always loved the game and playing with a team, it wasn't the same joy I'd had with the Redmen, and it definitely had enough of the classroom setting. I refused to buy into the lie that a four-year degree was the only path to happiness and success, so I joined the Marine Corps and served my country. Those years in the Corps were some of the most challenging and rewarding years of my life thus far. My time at Smith Center helped me prepare for the challenges of military life on the field and on the mat. With the Redmen, I learned about teamwork, dedication, and self-motivation. I learned how to support a teammate on and off of the field, and I began the experience sacrifice for the greater good. After my time in the Marine Corps, I had the opportunity to stay in California. But when Coach Hutch called and asked if I'd be interested in coming home to help coach the Redmen wrestling team, I couldn't resist. And despite my newfound intolerance for Kansas winters, home was calling. Suddenly, life in Smith Center didn't seem so small. Experiencing how the big world really is put things into perspective. I lived and worked all over our country and parts of the world, but Smith Center has always held a special place in my heart.
As a high school student, I thought, probably like many of you sitting here today, I'll never come back to this small town. For as long as I could remember, I'd known what I wanted to do. Maybe it started in the third grade when I overheard my dad tell his friend that I should be a lawyer because I could convince him that his blue shirt was red. Or maybe it was watching all those reruns of Law & Order after school when my friends were watching MTV. I just knew that that's what I wanted. I wanted to go to law school and practice law. And in my mind, that looked like a big city and a big office and a big building with a fancy suit. And so I did what I'd set out to do. I loved my time in college and law school, and in many ways, it was just as I'd pictured it. I found that my time at Smith Center had prepared me to be successful. I learned to study hard, to research thoroughly, to compose at the keyboard, and to meet deadlines. After law school, I started working at a small firm in Topeka, and the managing partner there, his name was Jim. He was a brilliant guy and a wonderful mentor, and he knew exactly how to teach young attorneys about the real practice of law. So he was exactly the kind of boss and mentor that you could only dream of finding in your first job. One day over lunch, he remarked how he couldn't believe what law schools were doing to young attorneys these days, how exorbitant it had become to pay for and increasingly difficult to pay off without sacrificing any hope of balance in your life. And it was as if a light bulb went off, as if he'd given me permission, a confirmation that it was okay to want to start a family, to see that family, to go places and go to events, and that wanting balance in your life could also mean success in your chosen career. And so when Pam Barta called me and asked, maybe even begged, if I would consider running for county attorney, I thought,